The detonation was felt before it was heard, a bone-deep shudder through the flagship's titanium vertebrae, the kind of ripple that made even seasoned soldiers glance toward the hull, as if it might split open. In the command throne, the Galactic King straightened, eyes narrowing, his upper crest flickering with irritated light. The bridge screens rippled from static to clarity, and there it was, a lone escape pod, drifting, spinning lazily, its distress beacon an erratic pulse against the velvet black. "Retrieve it," he ordered, his voice smooth and cold, like metal under ice. The retrieval beams latched on, drawing the pod in like a fisherman pulling in a reluctant catch. It wasn't the pod that caught the attention of the bridge crew. It was the fact that the interior heat signatures were steady, compact, and 4 in number. Small. When the hatch finally hissed open inside the hangar, the soldiers expected the chaos of wounded survivors, perhaps a desperate adult or two clutching their brood. Instead, 4 human children stepped out as if they'd been waiting for an invitation. They were different sizes, 2 boys, 2 girls, ranging from the half-grown gangliness of 12 years to the round-cheeked solidity of 6. No tears, no trembling, just wide, searching eyes, their pupils adjusting to the alien light. "Names," the security commander demanded, stepping forward, the claws of his secondary hands flexing in warning. The eldest boy glanced at his siblings, then at the commander, and spoke in clear, unaccented standard. "We're fine, thank you for asking. And you are?" It was disarming in its politeness, but more unsettling in its delivery. No flinch, no hesitation, no childlike quaver. The commander clicked his mandibles, annoyed. "You're aboard the flagship of the Galvar Dominion. You will answer questions." "Of course," said the smallest girl, her voice light as frost, "but you should probably let us sit first. Dad says it's rude to interrogate people when they've just arrived." The guards exchanged glances. Rude? The word was so absurd in the context of capture that a few snorted low laughs. The king, watching via feed, found it mildly amusing. Mild amusement was dangerous for him. It meant he was already underestimating them. They were escorted, gently, almost awkwardly, to the royal observation chamber. The chamber's arched windows poured starlight over the polished obsidian floor, the galaxy beyond glinting in 1,000 colors. The children seemed unimpressed by the grandeur. Instead, they whispered to each other in that quick, private way siblings do. The eldest girl, tall for her age, tilted her head toward the guards. 3 exits. 6 guards. Overhead vents are wide enough if you crawl sideways. The eldest boy nodded once, as if she'd reminded him to pick up milk on the way home. The king's advisor, an old and weathered Sarek named Veros, was summoned. His scaled brow furrowed at the sight of them. He had read reports, always hushed, always incomplete, about humans. The official line was that they were resourceful, but ultimately harmless, prone to emotional instability. Yet here were 4 representatives of their youngest, acting as if they were at a mildly inconvenient dinner party. "What ship were you on?" Averos asked. "Can't say," the second boy replied cheerfully. "Not because we won't. Because we actually can't. We weren't told. Security, you know." Averos froze for a fraction of a second. Children didn't speak like that. Not without hearing it from somewhere. The king arrived soon after, sweeping into the chamber with all the poise of a predator who had never once in his reign been threatened. His armor gleamed, his crown's biolights casting him in shifting gold and crimson. He looked the children over like a collector evaluating new specimens. "So," he said, voice purring, "you are the humans." The smallest girl squinted at him. "Are you the king?" "Yes," he said, allowing the pride to flow unhidden. "Oh," she said, tilting her head. "We thought you'd be taller." The soldiers stilled, unsure if they'd just heard an insult or a child's naive remark. The king, to his credit, smiled faintly. "Perhaps I seem smaller to those who stand unafraid." She smiled back. Maybe. That smile, Averos thought, is going to be the beginning of someone's nightmare. The king questioned them with theatrical ease, drawing chuckles from the court audience, as he teased out fragments about their journey. But he did not notice, at least not yet, that the eldest boy's eyes kept drifting to the data consoles, that the eldest girl was subtly noting the rhythm of the guard rotations outside the chamber doors. The middle boy had found a friendly technician and was learning alien words, but somehow kept steering the conversation to ship schematics. And the smallest girl, she was silent now, but her gaze was fixed on the starfield beyond the window, tracking something only she could see. Hours passed. The king, satisfied with his trophies, announced they would be presented to the court at the next cycle. The children were escorted to secure guest quarters, plush enough to be called generous, locked enough to be called a cell. Once alone, the eldest boy sat cross-legged on the floor. Timeline. The eldest girl leaned against the wall. If they stick to schedule, Mom and Dad are 2 days out. Less if they decide not to wait for clearance. Middle boy grinned. Think they'll go loud? The smallest finally turned from the window. They won't have to. We'll make sure of it. No fear. Not a drop. Just the calm of children who had been raised to know exactly what to do when the galaxy came knocking. Elsewhere on the ship, Averos stood before the king, his voice low. Your Majesty, forgive me, but I have heard warnings about human offspring. There was a case, an entire mining colony lost because a single human family was taken hostage. The king waved a clawed hand. My dear advisor, you give them too much credit. They are children. Averos's voice deepened. That's precisely why I'm concerned. The king chuckled, already turning away. Let them come for their cubs, if they dare. Far beyond the flagship's view, in the cold stretch of unclaimed space, a vessel rode dark against the void. It was small, almost unremarkable, its hull painted to swallow starlight. Inside, 2 adults sat side by side in the dim hum of readiness. The woman was checking weapons she had not yet decided to reveal. The man was watching a long-range feed from a stolen channel, his jaw set, his eyes still. 4 heat signatures. All steady, the man said quietly. The woman smiled faintly. Told you they keep busy. He nodded. 2 days. She looked at the chrono, then at him. Less. The feed crackled. For a moment, the faint sound of a child's laughter slipped through, bouncing against the hum of the ship's systems like a stone skipping across deep water. Back aboard the flagship, the smallest girl lay in her bed, eyes wide open in the dark. The vents carried the distant sounds of the ship, the hum of engines, the shuffle of alien boots. But beneath it, almost imperceptible, she heard it, the low, steady rhythm of another set of engines, moving closer. She smiled in the dark. The king slept in his chambers, dreaming of triumph and spectacle. He would wake to neither. The court chamber smelled faintly of molten alloys and alien perfumes, a blend that clung to the air like a challenge. The room was tiered in concentric arcs, rising like a stadium, so every species with the right political pull could witness the king's latest prize. Today's spectacle, for human children, clean now, dressed in neutral fabrics that didn't quite fit, and standing in the center of the polished obsidian floor beneath a sphere of shifting light. The eldest boy had his hands folded in front of him, posture perfect, expression neutral. The eldest girl stood slightly behind him, head tilted, eyes flicking in deliberate patterns, corners, exits, ceiling joints, guard stations. The second boy looked like he might fidget at any moment, but his fingers traced the edges of a small wooden token he'd been allowed to keep, thumb running over its grooves in a rhythmic pattern. The smallest girl's eyes roamed the crowd with unabashed curiosity, lingering a second too long on anyone who looked unsettled. The king's voice rolled across the chamber, warm and regal. Citizens of the Dominion, I present the humans. His pause afterward was designed to let the word land, heavy and exotic, and the murmurs it stirred pleased him. The eldest boy stepped forward a half-pace and gave a polite bow. Thank you for your hospitality, Your Majesty. We're honored to be your guests. Averos, standing at the king's side, felt his stomach knot. Guests. They spoke as if they had come willingly. Worse, several court members chuckled approvingly, charmed by the civility. A merchant from the Vora consortium leaned forward in his seat, curious. Tell us, young one, do humans often travel so far without supervision? The boy smiled faintly. Not often. But our parents trust us. We're very adaptable. That word, adaptable, hung in the air. Averos knew it for what it was, both true and dangerous. The eldest girl stepped in now, her voice clear and pleasant. We brought gifts. From a satchel she produced small wooden carvings, each shaped differently. A bird, a fish, a spiral. They were passed up to the dignitaries by guards, eliciting coos of approval. One diplomat turned the spiral in his hand. "What is this?" "A game," the eldest girl said with a serene smile. "If you keep it near you, you'll remember things better." Averos's scales prickled. Those little tokens were far too uniform to be mere carvings. Each had a faint metallic glint embedded in the grain. He glanced at the guards, but they seemed oblivious, distracted by the novelty of their charges. The middle boy drew a small crowd of younger aides and lesser courtiers by challenging them to a card game he claimed was ancient Earth tradition. He lost twice, won once, all while asking seemingly innocent questions. "How far is your home world? Do you get to travel on the big ships a lot? What's your emergency signal look like?" The answers were given without suspicion, laughter covering what they didn't realize they'd shared. The smallest girl tugged at the robe of a grandly dressed matriarch from a reptilian world. "Your scales are beautiful," she said earnestly. The matriarch preened under the praise, lowering her head to speak more softly. "Thank you, child. And you have very sharp eyes." The little girl smiled. "Mama says you should always notice everything. It keeps you safe." Somewhere in the upper tiers, a soft, uncertain murmur rippled through the watchers. Humans were supposed to be blunt, emotional, and messy. These four were deliberate, observant, and unsettlingly calm. The king called for refreshments. An array of delicacies was brought forth, steaming cups, intricate pastries, bowls of nutrient spheres. The children accepted their portions graciously. The eldest boy sniffed at his drink and asked what it was made from, then nodded politely and sipped without breaking eye contact with the king. The eldest girl rearranged the pastries on her plate into a rough approximation of the room's layout. The middle boy pretended to juggle nutrient spheres, dropping one in a guard's cup by accident, and apologizing with exaggerated sincerity. The smallest girl daintily dipped her pastry, then licked a crumb off her finger while watching the crowned guards change position. Averos stepped forward, bowing to the king. "Your Majesty, may I suggest?" "You may suggest nothing," the king said with an indulgent smile. "We are entertaining guests, not prisoners." "They are not," Averos began, but stopped when he felt the smallest girl's gaze on him. Her eyes were bright, curious, and oddly knowing. She tilted her head, and he had the sudden, irrational impression that she had just catalogued his weaknesses. The gathering shifted into open mingling. The eldest girl slipped toward the viewport with the second boy in tow, ostensibly to admire the starfield. She pointed out a cluster of lights to him in a low voice, and his smile widened. The eldest boy lingered near the ship's AI terminal, engaging the system in a learning game that had him spelling out ship terminology in standard. The smallest girl vanished into the legs and tails of the crowd, reappearing only to hand a wooden spiral to a guard she hadn't tagged yet. The king raised a cup in mock toast. "To our human guests, may they one day serve as a reminder of the Dominion's reach." The eldest boy raised his cup in return. "And to our hosts, may they always remember this day." There was a subtle weight to the phrase, one that Averos caught instantly. He excused himself from the king's side and moved to a shadowed alcove, opening a private comm channel. "Command Archive. Search for incidents involving human hostages in the past century." The AI hesitated. "Several records are sealed at the highest clearance." "Override," Averos said grimly. The feed returned fragments. Images of silent corridors, a warship's bridge abandoned mid-meal, planetary cities gone without trace. A recurring annotation appeared in several files. "Do not engage family units." His throat tightened. The court eventually adjourned. The children were escorted back to their quarters, still chatting politely, thanking each alien they passed for the lovely afternoon. Inside their room, the eldest boy closed the door and immediately moved to the small vent in the corner, unscrewing it with a hairpin the eldest girl had produced from her sleeve. The second boy emptied the contents of his pockets, a folded scrap of the ship's layout, a guard's spare ID strip, and a nutrient sphere he'd coated in some powder scraped from a wall panel. They bought it, the eldest girl said, satisfaction in her voice. All 4 exits in this sector connect within 50 meters. The vents are accessible if we take out one grate. Codes, the eldest boy asked. The second boy grinned. Guard rotation passwords for the next 2 days. The smallest girl curled up on her bunk, clutching her last wooden spiral. I tagged everyone in the court, she said softly, even the ones hiding behind the pillars. The eldest boy nodded. Good. That's enough. We wait. On the bridge, Averos stood at the viewport long after the chamber lights dimmed. The king had retired, content in his certainty. But Averos could not shake the feeling that something vast and dangerous was already in motion, something the Dominion's armor and fleets would not be enough to stop. He turned to leave, and froze when he caught movement at the edge of the starfield. A shadow, too distant for the flagship's sensors to flag, too deliberate in its path to be random debris. It was coming closer. In the locked human quarters, the smallest girl rolled onto her back and whispered into the dim air, as if answering an unheard question. Yes, Mama. We're ready. The docking clamps bit into the visiting vessel with a metallic growl, and the flagship's internal gravity shivered as if it, too, sensed the approach of something unwelcome. The corridor outside the royal docking bay had been cleared by order of the king, not out of fear, but because this arrival was to be handled without distraction. That, and perhaps because the advisors did not want the rank and file to see whatever was about to step off that unremarkable shadowskin craft. 2 figures emerged, walking side by side as though arriving for a polite dinner instead of a confrontation. Both were dressed in formal attire that seemed anachronistic even to human eyes. Deep navy jackets, crisp collars, clean lines, no insignia, no weapons in sight. The man was tall, his stride even, his eyes carrying the kind of stillness found in deep water. The woman walked with a faint, unhurried smile, her hair pinned neatly, her gloved hands folded loosely in front of her. Averos was there to meet them, flanked by guards who held their weapons angled low. State your names and your business aboard His Majesty's flagship. The woman inclined her head, her tone warm. Of course. I'm Elise. This is Nathaniel. We've come to thank the king for the care he's shown our children. One of the guards snorted, a short burst of disbelief. Averos didn't. He knew courtesy could be a blade as sharp as any plasma edge. The king received them in his throne chamber, lounging with calculated grace. So the parents arrive. You came sooner than expected. I thought perhaps you'd want time to negotiate terms. Nathaniel bowed slightly. We try not to keep people waiting, Your Majesty. It's rude. Elise smiled faintly. And we were eager to see them. They've never been aboard a flagship before. It's such an educational opportunity. The king chuckled. Oh, they've been very engaging. They've made quite the impression on my court. I'm glad, Elise said, her voice like silk laid over steel. They do have a gift for making themselves remembered. Servants brought refreshments, tall crystal flutes filled with a shimmering liquid, plates of delicate fruits arranged in symmetrical patterns. Nathaniel accepted a glass, examined it, and nodded approvingly. Efficient presentation, though I might suggest slightly altering the guard positions by the east exit. Their field of vision doesn't cover the full arc of the approach. In our line of work, that could be inconvenient. The king's smile didn't falter, but the twitch of his fingers against the armrest was telling. And what line of work is that? Oh, Nathaniel said mildly, parenthood. Elise set her glass down without drinking. We understand you've kept them in comfort. For that, we're grateful. But you must know we'll be taking them now. The king leaned forward, the lights catching on the ridges of his crown. You assume you have a choice. Her eyes didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Everyone has a choice. Not everyone lives with the consequences. A ripple of unease passed through the guards. It wasn't in her words, it was in the way she said them, with no threat in her tone, only inevitability. Averos cleared his throat, speaking low to the king. "Majesty, if I may." "You may not," the king said, eyes still locked on Elise. "Your children are on my ship, in my custody. I could keep them here indefinitely." Nathaniel's smile was polite, almost sympathetic. "Yes, you could. And then you'd spend the rest of your reign wondering when the debt would be collected. Wondering if the air in your lungs would always taste this clean, if your corridors would always be this quiet at night." The king's jaw tightened. "Is that a threat?" "No," Nathaniel said gently. "A reminder." A sudden tremor passed through the floor, subtle, but enough to make a drop of liquid slide down the side of Elisa's untouched glass. The guards shifted uneasily. The king's gaze flicked toward the ceiling, then back. "Your vessel is small," he said. "It cannot threaten us." Elisa's voice was soft enough to make him lean forward to hear it. "Do you think we came alone?" Before the king could reply, the chamber doors opened and the 4 children walked in, escorted by 2 uneasy guards. The eldest boy stopped a pace away from his parents, posture relaxed, but eyes sharp. "We've been busy," he said. "Good," Nathaniel replied. "Did you finish?" "All but the last one," the eldest girl answered. "We thought you might want to be here for it." The king's crest flared in irritation. "What is this?" Elise looked at him calmly. "You've had them here 2 days. Did you really think they were only talking about games and pastries?" The middle boy handed Nathaniel a folded scrap of material. "Codes," he said simply. The smallest girl moved to Elisa's side, slipping her hand into her mother's glove. "We tagged everyone." For the first time, silence settled heavy in the throne room. Averos' eyes darted between them, and the shape of the truth began to form in his mind. Nathaniel's voice cut into the quiet. "You have one chance to hand them back, Your Majesty. Otherwise, the quiet ends now." The king straightened. "You think you could take my ship?" Elise tilted her head, her faint smile returning. "No, we already have." Somewhere deep in the vessel, alarms began to sound, not the sharp blare of attack, but the slower, more insidious tone of system overrides. The king's comm implant crackled with overlapping reports. Sealed bulkheads, disabled weapons bays, navigation locked into standby. "You will stop this," the king growled. Nathaniel stepped forward, unarmed, unhurried. "We've been stopping it for 2 days. Now we're deciding how much to start." The guards tensed, waiting for the order to fire, but the king hesitated. The woman's gaze was steady, the man's expression calm, and behind them the children stood without a flicker of fear. It wasn't bravado. It was inevitability. Averos spoke, his voice rough. "Majesty, this is no longer about the children." "No," Elise agreed. "It never was." Her words hung there, heavier than any weapon. The king's crest dimmed slightly, the realization dawning, not just that he had underestimated them, but that he had never been in control. Nathaniel glanced toward the door. "Shall we?" The eldest boy nodded. "Corridors clear. Vents are locked on loop. We have about 6 minutes before they start cutting power to regain manual control." The king found his voice. "If you leave now, you'll be hunted to the ends of the..." Elise cut him off with the gentlest of tones. "You can't hunt what you can't find." Her hand closed briefly on her daughter's shoulder, a signal without words. The children turned as one toward the door, their movements unhurried, their path already chosen. The king's eyes followed them, but it was Averos who noticed something the others didn't. On the central display, for just an instant, a new icon had appeared at the edge of the system map. It was small, faint, and then gone, but he recognized it from the sealed files. It was the mark used by human strike teams to confirm position before an extraction. His mouth went dry. The chamber doors closed behind the humans, leaving the king in silence, the faint echo of their departure lingering like the scent of ozone before a storm. Far above the flagship's hull, invisible to its scanning arrays, something vast and patient waited in the dark. The flagship's corridors had a way of swallowing sound, but tonight they carried it. Faint alarms pulsing through the walls, the soft hiss of sealed bulkheads, the low murmur of confused voices over the comms. Somewhere in that labyrinth of steel and arrogance, the humans moved, their steps unhurried, as though they were the ones patrolling their own territory. Nathaniel led not because he had to, but because Elise's job was behind him. Eyes on everything they passed, hands brushing walls and control panels, leaving behind faint, invisible marks. The children walked between them, silent, their earlier lightness replaced by the kind of focus that seemed too old for their years. The eldest boy carried the folded scrap of material, like a map he could read without opening. The smallest girl's hand was in her mother's, but her eyes were already cataloging every door and guard shift they passed. The king remained in the throne chamber for a full minute after their departure, unwilling to give chase out of sheer pride. It was Averos who broke the stillness. "Majesty, if you intend to stop them, you have to do it now." The king's crest flared in stubborn heat. "They won't get far." "They already have," Averos said, his voice low. "The alarms are staggered, not central. That's intentional. They're pulling you in 3 directions before you even leave your seat." The king stood, his armor shifting around him with a metallic sigh. "Then I'll go in all 3. He moved toward the exit, summoning guards to converge on Sector 5, the humans' current position. Yet even as orders were relayed, entire corridors locked down, sealing squads inside. In the lower decks, Nathaniel stopped before a bulkhead. The eldest girl stepped forward, producing a small wooden spiral from her pocket and pressing it to the control panel. The embedded filament inside flared once, almost imperceptibly, and the door slid open without a sound. "Right," she said. They moved. 2 guards rounded a corner ahead, weapons up. The middle boy stepped forward, hands raised, speaking in the warm, careful tone of someone offering surrender. "Sorry, wrong way," he said, taking a step closer. "Do you know where the observation deck is?" The guards glanced at each other, lowering their weapons just slightly, and in that fraction of a second, Elise was between them. No drawn blade, no burst of fire, just a movement too quick to track, and then both guards were unconscious against the wall, weapons slid neatly aside. "Keep walking," she said, her voice still polite. A deck above them, the king watched through surveillance feeds. His jaw tightened. "They're not armed." Averos didn't look at him. "They don't need to be." The humans reached a service lift, the eldest boy swiping a stolen ID strip. It hummed to life, the doors closing them in a cocoon of dim light. The smallest girl leaned against the wall, speaking for the first time in minutes. "How much longer?" "For minutes," Nathaniel said. "To what?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. He glanced at her, the faintest of smiles at the corner of his mouth. "To when they realize it's already over." The lift opened onto a maintenance deck. The air here was warmer, denser, the heat from the ship's engines radiating through the walls. Pipes ran overhead like ribs. The middle boy darted ahead, crouching beside an open conduit. He pulled a small cylinder from his pocket, alien in design, human in purpose, and slid it into the junction. Lights along the wall flickered once, twice, then steadied into an unfamiliar pattern. "That's it," he said. "Navigation's locked." Up on the bridge, the navigation officer's voice broke through the king's comm. "Your Majesty, helm control is unresponsive." Sir, the coordinates are locked. We can't override." "Where is it taking us?" the king snapped. The officer hesitated. "It's nowhere. An empty sector." Averos exhaled through his teeth. "Not empty." The king turned on him. "You know something." "I know enough," Averos said grimly. "I've read the old files." The humans passed through another locked door, emerging into a wide corridor lined with weapons lockers. Nathaniel didn't open a single one. He simply walked past them, as though dismissing the idea they might be of use. Elise's eyes tracked every corner, every hatch, but she, too, ignored the weapons. The eldest girl tapped the smallest on the shoulder, pointing to a vent high in the wall. Without hesitation, the child climbed, slipped inside, and vanished. They waited. 40 seconds later, an emergency override on the far door engaged from the inside, and it slid open. The smallest girl emerged, brushing dust from her knees. "Guard post ahead is clear." I looped the cameras. The king's voice crackled through the overhead speakers, his tone sharp. "You're not leaving my ship alive." Nathaniel paused in the center of the corridor, tilting his head up as if to look him in the eye. "If that's what you're worried about, Majesty, you misunderstand us entirely." "Then explain," the king growled. "This was never about leaving," Nathaniel said. "It was about arriving." At that moment, every display on the ship, every console, every wall screen flickered. The Dominion crest dissolved, replaced by a small, simple spiral carved in wood, turning slowly against a black background. The bridge comms erupted with panic voices. Multiple sectors reported total systems lockout, doors opening where they shouldn't, airlocks cycling in sequence, but without loss of pressure, controlled, deliberate. The king barked orders, but his voice was drowned by the sound of something else breaking through the static. A slow, deliberate tapping, like knuckles against a table. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. On the maintenance deck, Elise looked at Nathaniel. "They'll trace it soon." "They can try," he replied. The eldest boy stopped at a sealed viewport and pressed his palm to the glass. Outside, the stars seemed still, until one of them blinked. Then another. Then a shape began to emerge from the darkness. It wasn't a ship in the Dominion sense, no sleek lines, no glowing engines. It was matte black, its outline broken into irregular planes that seemed to drink in the starlight. Even as it came closer, its size was impossible to judge. It was both too big and too quiet, like a predator gliding just under the surface of deep water. The king saw it on the bridge feed, and for the first time, his voice faltered. "What is that?" Averos didn't answer. He didn't need to. Nathaniel's voice came through the open channel, calm as ever. "That, Majesty, is the reason you shouldn't keep what doesn't belong to you." On cue, the flagship's shields powered down, not collapsing, but folding away like a curtain drawn back. No weapons fired. No boarding lines extended. The black vessel simply hung there, silent and implacable, its presence heavier than the ship's own gravity. Elise looked down the corridor, where the children stood watching. "Time to go." They moved toward the docking bay. The eldest girl and the middle boy peeled off briefly, ducking into side rooms to collect whatever final pieces of their quiet sabotage remained unfinished. The smallest girl skipped a half step to keep up with Elise, her expression almost serene. In the docking bay, the air shimmered as the black vessel extended a boarding tunnel. No clang of magnetic clamps, just a soft hiss as atmosphere equalized. The humans didn't rush. Nathaniel paused at the base of the ramp, glancing back at the small crowd of armed guards who had gathered. "None of you are going to fire," he said, almost kindly. "Because you're not sure what happens if you do. And because, deep down, you already know." Elise turned to Averos, who had followed at a careful distance. "You tried to warn him." He gave a slow nod. "It won't matter now." Her smile was faint, but not unkind. "It matters to us." They stepped onto the ramp. The children followed, filing into the tunnel without a backward glance, except the smallest girl, who paused just long enough to raise her wooden spiral in a tiny wave toward the nearest guard. The king's voice came over the bay's comms. Hard with pride, he refused to drop. "If you think this ends here." Nathaniel looked back one final time, his tone still maddeningly courteous. "Majesty, this is where it begins." The ramp sealed. The black vessel pulled away in total silence, vanishing into the starfield as though it had never been there. On the bridge, the navigation screens flickered once more, coordinates scrolling past faster than the eye could track, before resolving into a single chilling message: "Do not engage family units." Averos stood at the viewport long after the others had begun shouting for damage reports. The alarms had gone quiet, but in their place was something worse: the knowledge that the Dominion's most powerful warship had been breached, disarmed, and spared, because the humans had chosen to spare it. In the black between stars, aboard the silent vessel, Elise rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You did well." The smallest girl leaned into it. "I told you they'd be ready." Nathaniel took the pilot's chair, glancing at the far edge of the display. "They'll talk about this for decades." "They'll do more than talk," Elise said softly. "They'll wonder." He smiled faintly. "Good. Let them. As the stars stretched into lines, the vessel disappeared into jump, leaving behind only the hollow echo of 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, on the Dominion's encrypted channels. Somewhere in the void, the king stared into the darkness beyond his viewport, and for the first time in his reign, he imagined a galaxy in which he was not the predator.